Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's talk. My name is Julie Taylor, and I am the principal at Belvedere Academy, which is one of the two all-through academies within the GDST family of schools. So it's my pleasure to be the host for this evening's talk. This is part of the GDST Talks series, as I'm sure many of you know, and it's a really exciting opportunity for us at the Trust to be able to bring you these talks online, so it enables us to reach more of our families across the Trust schools and also more of our alumni. And it's something we're really proud to be doing, to be bringing you some expert and prestigious speakers on a range of different topics. Just a few things to do with housekeeping to begin with. We suggest that you opt for your speaker view rather than a gallery for the optimal viewing experience, because there will be some slides to have a look at this evening as well. If you would like to submit some questions for the Q&A session at the end of the talk, then please use the Q&A function. We'd love to hear from you, so do feel free to ask away. And when Andrew has finished this evening, I'll be coming in with some of those questions, and we can share those with us at the end of the talk. If you've got a technical issue at all, if you could use the chat function, as I can see that some of you are doing already, rather than the Q&A, that would be great. Obviously, as we all know to our cost, technology can be very temperamental, so please bear with us if we have any technical issues. So it's my great pleasure this evening to introduce Andrew Hampton. Andrew is a head teacher himself, and he is also CEO of Girls on Board. And we're going to hear all about this approach this evening, which, having taught in girls' schools for over 20 years, I'm fascinated to hear what he's got to say all about how girls navigate their friendships, specifically perhaps enabling girls to find their own solutions. As I'm sure you've noticed from the bio, Andrew's organisation has won several prizes and been shortlisted for some more. And I know that over 200 schools are already using this approach. So welcome, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. As I said, audience, if you'd like to put questions in Q&A, then we'll have some of the questions after the talk, which will be about 40 minutes. So if you're ready to start, Andrew, I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Julian. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and good evening to everyone. So yes, who am I? I'm Andrew Hampton. I am the head teacher of Pupil School, been there since 2007. So my story really begins about a couple of years later, when I was finding that girls, particularly in years 7, 8 and 9, when they fell out with each other, no matter how hard we tried to find solutions to get the girls together, to involve parents positively, to find ways to just meld their friendships back together again, it just didn't really work. So much so that actually girls started to leave the school. And I was losing 2 or 3 girls every single year. And I felt it was quite tragic every time that happened. I just felt this is the wrong decision. And it felt just a very dramatic thing to have to do, to leave the school because of friendship issues. So I did some research, and I came across a woman called Rosalind Wiseman, and she'd written a book called Queen Bees and Wannabes, which is a multi-million seller in the USA, actually. And it was the book that inspired the movie Mean Girls. And if you've not seen that, I think you really should, because it's great. And I'm very, happy to acknowledge that Girls on Board as a thing is really Queen Bees and Wannabes for school. Queen Bees and Wannabes is a parent guide. Girls on Board is a way of, it's an approach that teachers use in school. And it's my job tonight to sort of tell you about that, but also hopefully very much give you some real details about how you can support girls in their friendships, because I'm sure the reason that you're here tonight is because when you have experienced that in your own daughter, it can be so distressing for her, and so therefore very, very distressing for you. I'm a father of 2 girls myself, and it's just so horrible to see them go through this stuff and feel that you have nothing to offer them, or you try but it doesn't seem to work. So that's my kind of aim for tonight. So what is Girls on Board in a nutshell? And forgive me if I turn to my right a few times this evening to read out my script, but that's important for me. So a Girls on Board session presents girls with activities which promote group reflection. This helps girls realize the depth of their commonalities and empowers them to realize that they are the only ones who can resolve their differences and conflict effectively. The role of the adults then is to support, but not to interfere. So what's coming up on this evening's webinar? How do girls' friendships work and why are they so important? So I'm going to describe my sense of observed truths over 30 years, 35 years of working in schools. I mean, Pupil school is actually girls and boys all through, and working very much with my daughters as well and what they've told me about friendships. And I think this will build credibility for you. Why girls find it so hard to express what they are actually upset about when things go wrong within friendships, and what to do and what not to do to support her at home. I just want to dip into this one because this is a very useful analogy from the Queen Bees and Wannabes book, which I do think is a great book to buy. The classic girl clique is like a life raft for adolescent girls. Imagine you and your daughter are on a cruise ship. Then girls start telling each other that the ship is stupid and boring and it's time to get off. As you watch helplessly, she leaves behind everything that is safe and secure, gets into a life raft with people who have very little in common with her except their age. Excuse me, and she drifts away. Now, I'm not going to read all my slides, but I do like to read this one because this is the one actually I use at the beginning of the Girls on Board session, both for the girls themselves when I'm doing one or when I'm training teachers. On the whole, girls want to get on with everyone and be happy, but sometimes they find the search for trusting and reliable friendships is hard, and that without these friendships, they feel very unhappy. Their unhappiness is often displayed through tearfulness and even depression. Adults can only help in very limited ways because the problems within friendship groups are very fluid and difficult to express precisely.
Yes.
When you were fired, did people gang up on you?
We've just been through this. I wasn't fired.
Yeah, but did they gang up on you?
Yeah, well, a bit maybe. Has someone been ganging up on you?
Well, yes, because Molly said that Megan said that I was talking to Maisie about Katrina saying bad things about Catherine and Stacey.
Right.
Which isn't true because I didn't say anything to Maisie. She's just making up to make me look bad to Molly.
Right.
And Megan told Tanya because she wants to be friends with Tanya and Molly. And then they're all on Megan's side, which isn't right. Do you get what I'm saying?
So you're cross with Megan?
No! Weren't you listening? Then Katrina told Megan that she was a pig, and Megan told Miss. But then Katrina started telling everyone that it was my fault because of what I said to Maisie. But I didn't even say anything to Maisie. So now Tanya's telling everyone not to be my friend because I can't keep a secret, which is really, really, really unfair on me.
No, you're right, sweetheart. But you see, girls your age, have you heard the word clique? No, well, a clique is like a little private gang, but the cliques keep on changing. So the best thing is not to let it bother you. You just got to ignore it. Okay?
Do boys have cliques?
No, boys don't form cliques. They're too busy punching each other.
It's a great clip. It's a great clip. So we come now to what I think is the most fundamental and most important thing about girls in school and their friendships, and about Girls on Board, and kind of what Girls on Board is based on. Every girl needs a friend. Now, some of you will be sitting there going, well, we knew that. It's a pretty obvious thing to say. But I think the point about this is that it goes, first of all, it goes a little bit deeper by saying it's not just about having a friend. It's actually about having at least one girl in your year group in your school. That one girl in your year group in your school, that's absolutely vital. So it's lovely if you've got girls outside of school, that works. You can have girls in other year groups, that's lovely, but it's no substitute for having at least one other friend in your year group in your school. Let's take that moment when a girl arrives at her registration in the morning. As she opens the door and she comes in, and there are all the girls sitting there waiting for the teacher to read out the register. And she realizes that there's nowhere to sit. There's nobody. I've fallen out with these people. I'm very uncertain about those people. I don't really know. And that moment for a girl is absolutely crucial. And she feels like she wants the ground to swallow her up. She wants to turn around and go home for sure. It's just so much more painful than perhaps we as adults remember or can fathom, really. And it is, as it were, as I put here, an existential imperative. It is the most important thing for a girl at school. And when I ask that to the girls, they nod and kind of go, this guy's, he understands us. And when the grown-ups start to acknowledge this, things start to change. When the school acknowledges it, things start to change. And my sort of advice to you, therefore, as parents, is that kind of whatever turbulence your child is going through around friendships or around school in many ways, actually, if you drive your thinking through that one prism of the existential imperative, you start, oh, I see this is about, oh, right, yes, it's because she's feeling anxious, insecure about finding trusting and reliable friendships. That's what this is. So anyone can have a bad day. You can have a bad day. I can have a bad day. But I do think sometimes grown-ups are a little bit guilty, and I'm sure I'm myself, of turning to your partner or your good friend, maybe ringing somebody up after a bad day and just ranting, just letting it all out. When pupils have a bad day, when your daughter has a bad day, we don't necessarily give her the chance to express herself in the same way that we do. We all, as human beings, need to offload. So let's take a little scenario here. Let's take two girls. Let's imagine we've got a girl called Helen and a girl called Amaya, and they're both 12 years old, so they're sort of year 7, year 8. And they're just getting into that phase of their adolescence where they enjoy buying accessories. And they talk about a bag that they've seen in the high street. But oh dear, the next day, both girls have been shopping the evening before and have bought the same bag. Now, Helen, unfortunately, reacts badly to this. And although she smiles and gives Amaya a wave and says, love ya, she moves away from Amaya and starts to hang out with other girls. And Amaya is just devastated. She goes home so upset. And she's crying, and she says to her parent says, what? Oh, what's the matter, Amaya? What's happened? Why are you so upset? It's Helen, she sobs. Did she say something bad to you? Have you fallen out, says the parent. And Amaya thinks to herself, you know what, trying to explain this is just, it's just going to make it worse. And so she says, I don't know, maybe I'm not sure, I can't tell you, you wouldn't understand. And she goes to her room. So as a parent, what would you do? It's so hard, it's so tricky. Would you call the school? Sometimes parents sort of say, well, I'm going to, I know the head here, I know the form teacher really well, so I'm going to call them up and just say, look, don't say anything, but I just wonder, is, Helen and Amaya, my daughter, are they getting on? Can you look into it? Okay, tricky for the school, that one. Would you perhaps ring Helen's parents and just say, perhaps we need to share something. The girls seem to have fallen out. Okay, we can come back to that. Or would you be the kind of parent who listens and then distracts? Because you see, I think that this story leads to a very common misconception, and that is that just because somebody's upset doesn't mean to say that somebody else did something wrong. And actually that, of course, is very much the case in this story. Did Amaya do anything wrong? No. Did Helen do anything wrong? No. She decided to go and be with some other girls for a bit, and she did wave and say goodbye, and she hasn't really been mean, and it's very, very difficult. Now, this is where it's useful to start introducing some terminology that I've created for Girls on Board, and I think that this is a great expression: normal, if regrettable, turbulence. It is conflict, but conflict is quite a strong word. Bullying is a very strong word. It's turbulence, and so much of what is happening around girl friendships is just that. And if we go for that to that lovely raft analogy, it's like someone has thrown a great big rock into the sea, and all the rafts are doing this, and that's what it feels like for the girls. They're uncertain. How am I getting on with my friends? Do I need to change to a more stable raft? And it's turbulence. I think that's so important. So, talking also, again, about the idea of using terminology from Girls on Board, I find it very, very useful to describe some behavior types and some situations. And before I start this little section of the presentation, I just think it's really important to remind you, or to remind myself, that these are behavior types. They're not girls. We're not saying you are this or you are that. We're not trying in any way to condemn girls, but we're saying that some girls, some of the time, are behaving like this. Some of these are negative behaviors, some of them are positive ones. The first one I think is, again, a really useful expression, the girl in the water. So what we mean by that is, and it goes back to the raft analogy, it's a girl who doesn't have a raft on to be on right now. She doesn't have a friendship group. So that could be one of three reasons. It could be that she has been rejected by a group, and Amaya would be in that situation. Helen appears to have rejected her and she feels in the water. She may have rejected herself, of course. You do get that self-excluding behaviors sometimes, or she might just be a brand new girl in the school and therefore doesn't have a friend yet. So onto the queen bee. Now, a queen bee is an expression used a great deal by society. And I think we have to be careful, again, not to condemn people. And we have to be mindful of girls who behave in a queen bee kind of way, that, you know, what's their story and how can we help and support them? But just to kind of be clear, my view of what a queen bee behavior is that kind of thing where a girl will get very, very close to another girl and be the best friends, and the girl's quite flattered because the queen bee girl behavior is often very magnetic and quite charismatic. And then out of the blue sky, she just rejects her and goes off to do somebody, to be friends with somebody else, and maybe even makes up rumors about this girl. And then 4 or 5 weeks later, it flips back again and she's friends again. And this behavior creates turbulence. But why do they behave like that? It's usually because they are just as involved in trying to find trusting and reliable friendships as anybody else, if not more so. Leadership is so vital for us all in society, and GDST, of course, is so strong on the idea of girl leaders and female leadership. But it's very tough at school because girls need to blend, and boys for that matter, need to blend, need to fit in with each other. And leadership by its very nature means that you're kind of raising your head above the parapet and you're making yourself vulnerable to be rejected. So we absolutely applaud leaders and leadership behavior when we see it and say, well done, because it's so useful and so vital for society, for girls in school and indeed later on in life. Then I have this expression, the would-be leader. Would-be leader behavior is when a girl really would like to be the leader of the group. She would like to be the one when they go out into the playground and say, hey, let's go and sit under the tree. It's a hot day. It's nice and shady. And everyone just looks at her and says, well, no, okay. But why? You know, why would we do what you're saying? And then another girl just says, I think we should go and sit on the picnic benches, and they all trot off there. And the would-be leader is going, what is it? I don't get this. I don't understand why I don't have that thing. And it can lead to, again, to turbulence. It can lead to little bits of jealousy happening, and it's definitely one to look out for. Now, the peacemaker is, again, a wonderful form of behavior, because the peacemaker, we are grateful to them for reducing the amount of turbulence very, very much every single day in all of our schools. They are the sort of girl who just says, look, I think we can just calm down. I think you need to just acknowledge that she said this and she didn't mean it, and that kind of behavior, which is great. And I think if you're the mother or father of a peacemaker, you know, well done and well done her, but sometimes you have to encourage her to stick up for herself. You know, sometimes she makes so many kind of compromises that actually you want to say, no, sometimes you need to put yourself first. It's important to do that. Now, messenger behavior. When I present this to girls in the Girls on Board session, they all go, yeah, we know that. We know that. It's where a girl will be in one group and sort of listening in and sort of maybe taking some little sort of tittle tattle, and then going across to another group and sharing that in a way that's not particularly, you know, honest, and she may even make things up. And she creates a lot of drama around her name, and sometimes it can be quite exciting, but it nearly always backfires on her. But it can be often at the root of some turbulence. You can think, oh, I know what's going on here. She's told this person and that person, and that's why things are going wrong. Now, the hopper is, again, a wonderful form of behavior, because the hopper is the kind of girl who genuinely seems to be in one group 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, great. Then she spontaneously decides that she would just like to be with other girls, and she goes off and joins another group. And this original group doesn't mind. They're very happy with that. And the other group says, oh, hi, it's you again, you know. And it's extraordinary. And it came about actually from a girl in my school when I was describing these things, and somebody put their hand up and said, but you haven't described what Maddie does. Maddie is literally friends with everybody and is part of everybody's group, and her name was Maddie Hopper. So I just thought that was great. It's this idea of sort of hopping between the rafts. I'm not sure that you can encourage your daughter to be a hopper, but I think a lot of girls it just doesn't work like that. It's a bit special. I'm not sure how it came about. I've got my own theories, but I haven't got time for that today. It's in the book. The lonely girl. Now, the lonely girl is a girl who behaves in a way that she's not really connecting enough with other girls. She's not putting the energy in to really make those kind of friendships happen, because we all know that friendships is very largely based on what you've got in common, and sometimes you just need to make that up. You know, if you don't share horses, you don't share your love of EastEnders or whatever, maybe it's pink slippers, or it's, you know, bunches or something that you kind of think, oh, we both love that. And the lonely girl is just not doing that. Sometimes she's a bit overtied to her parents, and they are her friendship sort of stay, and she needs to grow and start to break that umbilical cord and start to put the energy in at school. Very, very difficult form of behavior to encourage and to support when it happens. And then lastly, the singleton. Quite rare, but you do occasionally come across a girl for whom it really, and I suppose this is more of a type really than a behavior, for whom it really doesn't seem to matter. They have friends and they get on well, but when everyone's sort of, you know, falling out with each other, and maybe she finds herself on her own, or if all her friends have gone, you know, to play netball, she doesn't mind, and it's fine. She's just self-contained. And again, I'm not sure that you can say to your daughter, I want you to be a singleton. It just seems to happen in that way. Another thing that I do with Girls on Board sessions is we talk about the way that girls form their groups. As you can see, pairs, 3s, 4s, 5s, and more than 5. Now, you certainly get groups that might be, you know, sort of 20 or 17, whatever. But within that, you're going to find that there are 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. And more than 5, I think on the whole, you talk to the girls, they say, yeah, they maybe flare up for a little bit if there's a 6, but well, I'll come to this really, but they're so difficult to manage that actually they fall apart or just break up into smaller groups. And what I do is I share with the girls the advantages and disadvantages of being in these group sizes. So pairs, I think the obvious thing to say about a pair is, generally speaking, people feel that the smaller the number in the group, the closer you are. So that pair is the kind of the ideal thing for really getting close to somebody and sharing your pain and your joy and all the rest of it. And that's lovely. Disadvantage, when it goes wrong, it can be very painful. If the girl that you're friends with is off playing netball, or she's ill, then you have no backup. So that's a disadvantage. Sometimes pairs can be so close they draw jealousy from other groups. I don't know if that's something that you may have come across. 3s, some parents have said to me over the years that they feel, perhaps from their own experience of school, that anything that's got an odd number in it just doesn't work. And I disagree, actually. I think, yes, school furniture designers, it's always in pairs, and minibus have pairs of seats and one at the back and whatever. And that's difficult. But I think the difficulty is what actually encourages a group of 3 to therefore negotiate how they're going to do this, and to be mindful that it was my turn yesterday, it's your turn today, but we're going to look after you. We're going to turn around and wave every now and again and make sure that you still feel part of it. 3 is a good number because you've got a backup if one person's not there. A disadvantage slightly is that if 2 girls fall out then and you're the other one, then you have to kind of referee between them. One of the things that really connects the girls when I'm saying this, and starts that empathy flowing actually, is I say that if you've got 3 girls and you're that girl, I think you feel that these 2 are closer. You look at the other 2 girls and you worry that they're closer. But I point out that if you're that girl, you worry about those 2. If you're that girl, you worry about those 2. That actually they kind of go, yeah, actually, I can see that. I can see what you're saying. 4s naturally split into 2 pairs, although it's worth saying that the configuration of those pairs are not always as equal as they might be. But when you get into 4s and 5s, and I kind of touched on this earlier, the problem then becomes the sort of the organization, the logistics and the administration of a group of that size. So for instance, I'll say to the girls, if you're going to go out on a Saturday night and you're going to Nando's and 3 of you can make it, but unfortunately the 4th girl has got Uncle Eric's wedding and she's got to go to that. So what do? You're going to go or you're not going to go? And the debate ranges around the room. You know, some girls will say, yes, of course we'd go, you know, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. And others kind of go, oh, it's quite difficult, it's a difficult conundrum, we don't want to put people left out. And then that kind of elides into a discussion about social media. So what would you do there in that situation? Would you shower the girl on a Saturday night with lots of pictures and videos and gifs of you having a great time so that she feels part of it? Or actually, would you do the opposite? Would you go kind of media blackout and you know, so that she doesn't have to kind of experience Uncle Eric's wedding where she's getting very bored, all my friends having a good time. And again, the penny is dropping with the girls. This is interesting stuff. Yeah, this is exactly the sort of debate that we have. Now, the reason that I want to share these things with you is because I think that if you have these kind of conversations with your daughter, it'll be a different kind of conversation. And I think she will kind of see that you get the reality of what it's like to be a girl in school. And I think when you talk about behavior types, or particularly just the group sizes, what do you think about group sizes? You'll find she has lots to say, and it's a very new and fresh conversation because, let's face it, it is difficult talking to teen and preteen girls in terms of retaining that real closeness that you really want as a parent, and actually getting her to open up properly and share. And some of you may feel that you're still very, very close to your daughter and she tells you everything. But I'm here to sort of say, but does she actually? And let's look at the whole idea of relational disconnect, because I think there is a relational disconnect. So far, I've given you some insights into how girls form friendships in school, how sometimes they behave within those friendships, and most significantly, why friendships are so incredibly important. Now I'd like to look at various reasons why I think it can be so hard for your daughter to express what has happened to make her upset when that happens, and why it's so difficult for you as her parent to hear and understand that story properly. It is part of the human condition, is it not, that every generation considers itself to be new and different. Young adults are usually reluctant to take too much guidance and advice from the older generation because they feel they are going to bring fresh and revolutionary perspective to everything in the world. Communication between generations is never straightforward, and teen and preteen girls talking to their parents are no exception to that. By the time we reach adulthood, we have often forgotten the intricacies and agonies of teenage emotions, anxieties, and group dynamics. Things move on, new trends become cool, and different blunders become embarrassing. Girls often struggle to communicate those troubles to parents, and parents, in turn, fail to recall how central they are to young girls. So the problem is that what is said and what is heard is not the same thing. So what do we learn from that? Well, there's that mother doing great mothering and being incredibly positive and identifying something that she knows that she can do, her daughter can do better, and being really, really super positive about it. And she doesn't know that the girl, her daughter, is just hearing that in a very, very different way. And what I'm going to say next, I think some of you may find controversial, but I think it's really, really important because I've just witnessed it so often in my office as a head teacher, actually, of parents lecturing. And I kind of go to myself, okay, so you're telling your daughter about secondary school. You're saying, you know, what you need to understand is, and you'll meet lots of different friends, and it's this and it's that. And I'm going, I wonder actually if you asked yourself, first of all, is this the first time you've ever said this? Because I'm pretty sure it isn't. Parents lecturing, I did it myself, you know, of course I did. But, you know, is this new information? Is it useful? Did she ask you for it? I just think lecturing is just not a great idea, particularly as she gets older. And it may well be that she sits there and listens and politely smiles and so on. But inside she's going, oh, really? Okay. And she's polite and she respects you. So she's not going to say that. But I think there's a price to pay further down the line. Right. Now, not only that, but daughters also don't make themselves very clear either. So it, it might be hairband, it might be shoes. Goodness me, it's you can just see, can't you, and how difficult it is. She's just really perturbed. So what's actually going on? It's just too nuanced and complex. Her father in that situation is probably wondering whether Debbie and Andrew actually have got his daughter's best interests at heart. But really what she's saying, it's to do with the existential imperative. It's what she's saying is that she's worried and alarmed about the nature and the quality of her friendships with Debbie and Andrew at the moment. And she feels very, very uncertain. And she wants, in that moment, to blame someone. She wants to just, help me. What am I helping you with? I don't, can't say. Right. What's the second reason that girls find it very, very difficult to open up and to be entirely open and honest about what's going on? They don't want to get told off. So very, very, very important here. It seems to me that parents, quite rightly, I mean, this is parenting, isn't it? That you want to be the guardian of their moral and ethical behavior. And that the slightest hint that they did something wrong, you want to say, no, I'm sorry, but no, come on, you shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have sent that text. And from the girl's point of view, you're going, okay, so all my friends did this and this and this and this and this, and you're picking me up because I said that one thing. Not all parents do this, but it's pretty common. And so, of course, they're going to tell you an adapted version of the truth. I mean, let's call it out. It's lying. And there was research done that said by the age of 4, 40% of girls and boys have lied to their parents at the age of 4. Okay, let's have a look at this next little video. So there we go. It's difficult. It really is. When she comes home after a bad day, this is a very important moment. She's telling you the story of her day from her point of view and why right at that moment she's very upset. All sorts of turbulence, all sorts of thoughts going through her mind, which she's finding very, very difficult to express and to, she needs to make them sound serious enough. I mean, that's one of the things we're going to come to, this idea of raising the bar so that you react. If it was just like, I saw this girl and I smiled at her and she looked away and I'm really uncertain about that. If you say that to your parent, she's going to go, you really need to toughen up and be more resilient. So, but she's still feeling very difficult about it and very pained by it. It may well therefore sound like a tale of wrongdoing. She said this and she did that and she gave me a funny look. It probably isn't, not in this context. She's telling you how she's feeling about things right now in terms of her search for trusting and reliable friendship and how it's going right now. So when she comes home, this is kind of how she's feeling about this. Now, as she comes home, you need to work out, are you going to listen to the story itself, which may well be confused and illogical, and you're going, oh, and then she's like the man in the video. You may well find that the time scale is very mashed up and you're saying, so she did this and then she did that, she did what, all today? She did that? Oh no, so this was last week. And you're going, so what, hang on, that happened, and you get very, very tied up in a time scale problem. She may appear to be sort of unreasonably upset. You're listening to the story and you're going, so because that happened, gosh, I'm so sorry, you just seem so upset right now. Her version of the truth is being distorted by the fact that she doesn't want to get told off, and the absolute truth is too nuanced, complex, and possibly, as I said, too trivial to express precisely. This is what she's thinking. It was my niece who said this to me about my sister-in-law. She said, it's so important to understand that I'm telling you not because you need to know, but because I need to tell you. And so often I think that parents make the mistake of reacting to the story instead of reading the emotional subcontext. So as you try to pour love and support into your daughter, you've also got some really difficult conundrums to navigate, as it were. The first one, you want to give her unconditional love. Of course, you're a parent who you love her beyond words, but at the same time, you're demanding of the highest possible standards of moral, ethical, and social behavior. And those two things don't always marry up in the way that you then speak to your daughter. And I think the other one, of course, is you want to keep her safe. But at the same time, you want her to grow, you want her to become independent, you know that eventually she will leave home and so on. And that kind of age-appropriate parenting is so difficult to navigate. And often girls and boys, for that matter, sort of complain that their parents, they treat them slightly too young. So let's have a look at this from the point of view of Maslow's hierarchy of need. Many of you, I'm sure, will have come across this. If you haven't, it's a lovely idea. It's this pyramid, this hierarchy of what is the most important thing you must have, and then what is, if you've got all of these things, what can you then achieve? So you can see here physiological needs of air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and so on. This idea that, you know, that's life. Without that, you don't even exist. Then you've got to be safe, okay? Then actually we can start to talk about love and belonging, and then self-esteem, and then the beauty of having all of those things as a human being means that you can just be the very best you can be, and you are there. Now, let's have a look at that. Let's rewrite the Maslow hierarchy of need in terms of you, what you as a parent want in relation to your daughter. You want her first and fundamentally to be safe and healthy, and that, you know, you put a lot of time and effort into that, into making her feel safe, but also behave in safe ways and healthy ways as well. You also, particularly at this age, try to hang on to that sense that she is able to talk to me about anything. And that's why I think I'm talking so much about communication, because that is such a fundamental need for you as a parent. Then you want her to fulfill her potential and then to be happy. Now, listen, some of you may disagree completely with those things, but and it may be an interesting dialogue to have with your daughter and with your partner, with yourself, about what you would put in there. I mean, I haven't put learning in there, for instance, you know. But then if I move on to the next slide, we have a match between what the parents are thinking and what the daughter needs. Now, let's have a look at what I'm saying about the daughter. Again, this is just my view. Reliable and trusting relationships is the fundamental thing, okay? They don't care about shelter or food, or, you know, that's a given. That kind of just doesn't even reach the radar. The most important thing for them is reliable and trusting friendships, and possibly a sense of belonging. I think that's really important. And then access to social media, you know, I mean, again, this is like, for the grown-ups, it's like, really? And you think, yeah, I mean, my daughter who's 25, it's like, social media is it. If you take that away, going to be dramatic here, but if you want to punish your child because she's done something wrong, and you think, I'm going to take your phone away, okay, you know, that's fine. But it's a little bit like sticking a tape across her mouth. You are stopping her from communicating, okay? Just sort of think about that. Access to a non-judgmental listening ear, and then ultimately this sense of autonomy. But I want to go back and just have a look at this idea of access to a non-judgmental listening ear, because many parents quite rightly see themselves as judges of, as we've said before, this moral standards of behavior, which they should be. And therefore, parents have a tendency to listen and judge. But girls don't want to be judged and feel that their parents don't understand and appreciate the existential imperative for them to find secure and trusting, reliable friendships, and that actually little bits of misbehavior to get those reliable friendships are justified from the girl's point of view. And therefore, it's from their point of view, it's more important than moral behavior. And this fundamental tension leads girls to adapt the truth or to say very little, which is odds with what the parent needs. Now, when I was doing a girls on board session about 4 or 5 years ago, I was slightly wrong-footed by a girl near the end of the session asking me what I felt was rather a strange question. She said, where do pets fit into this? And I was, didn't know what to say. So I said, I just reflected it back to the girls. I said, so who talks to their pet? And to my astonishment, the hands went up. 85% of all the girls I've taught over the last 4 or 5 years, dozens and dozens at school, it's the same. It's about 85% will talk to number one choice, the dog, okay? The other 15% don't have a dog. They talk to share their problems, okay? They talk to the sofa, the aunts and uncles, the brothers and sisters, the diary, a wall, and God, and so on. And it's, I don't know, it's not a particularly easy thing for me to share with you, because that's not really what you want, and it's probably not what you want me to say, but it is just true. And yeah, I often say to the girls, if your parents put a microphone on the collar of the dog, they know everything you're feeling at the moment. And they say, yes, they really would. They really would. Okay, so, right, we get to the pith of my presentation. What can you do to support your daughter through times of friendship turbulence? And I'm going to start with a kind of a bit of a negative. I'm going to say, these are the things I think you shouldn't do, all right? Now, if I was face to face with you in a space, I would be saying, everyone stand up. And when you hear me, I know you can't read this stuff, so don't worry, I'm going to read that for you. So everyone stand up. And if you hear one of these expressions, one of these sentences that you have said to your daughter, then sit down. If you want to do this at home, you could either stand up and do it, or you could put your hand in the air or whatever. But just think about, am I going to say one that you think, yeah, I've said that to my daughter, okay? And then we'll talk about that at the end. So here we go. Have you said? Have you tried talking to them? I think you should forgive and forget and move on. There are plenty of other girls in the school. Make new friends. When I was at school, we didn't have any of this sort of thing going on. I just think you should put your mobile phone away and do something else. How do you want me to fix this? Shall I ring the school? Shall I ring the parents of the mean girls? I just think these other girls are horrible, and they don't even know why you want to hang out with them. Perhaps you should have thought twice before being friends with Sophia again. I know Jessica's mum, and I can't believe Jessica would say things like that to you. All this socializing and the problems that go with it are getting in the way of getting a good grade, young lady, and I suggest you focus on more important things. You don't go to school to socialize, you go there to learn, so just think about that. Why don't we have some of your friends over for a sleepover and you can have a good time, but only 2. Just because everyone else has the same shoes as each other doesn't make your shoes horrible and disgusting. These other girls just don't matter. You should ignore them. My friend has a daughter in the year below. Why don't we see if we can make friends with her? I'll talk to your teacher again and see if we can do what we can do to sort all this out. I think you're amazing and special, but getting on with other girls is clearly not a strength of yours. Your sister never had these problems. Have you thought about this from the other girl's point of view? Do you think this is about your hormones? This is just a phase you're going through. It'll pass. It's probably just because the other girl is jealous of you. Why don't you try to just not let it bother you? Why don't you show me all the texts you have and we'll go through each one, including what you replied with. Having conversations with your daughter. Oh, so I want to finish off that. Well done if you've still got your hand up, because I think if you took that slide and you read those things out to your daughter, she would kind of go, every time, please, not that one, not that one. All these things that adults say, and they don't mean anything to them, and they're just frustration, actually. You kind of, the credibility goes down, they feel patronized. So yeah, wow, I'm right out there with that one. But actually, again, it's coming from observed truths, it's coming from working with girls. I read some of those phrases out in the Girls on Board session and they groan. Now, having conversations then, I just want to point out that sometimes, not always, but sometimes it can be good to have a conversation with your daughter when you're not looking at each other, because she may just find it easier to share with you in a car like this or on a walk or wherever, really. And I came across one family, actually, that's quite interesting. I've heard it a couple of times. One family who said, we have this rule in my family that what is said in the car stays in the car. And I don't think they meant that they couldn't tell the husband or the wife, but they had to be dealt with. They couldn't then come to like, oh, well, because you tell I'm going to take your phone away, or it was contained within the car. Very interesting. And it did, I think, lead to some very honest conversations. Now, this is what I think you should be doing. This is from me. This is from my experience. Your daughter wants you to be close, but also respectful of her space. She wants you to acknowledge her experimental identities, but also be unafraid to guide her when they go too far. She wants you to defend her and be her champion, but not to embarrass her or become over-involved. She will want time alone, but to remain connected. She wants freedom, but not to be abandoned. She wants you to acknowledge her existential pain and not be panicked by it. Now, I'm going to sort of read out a little bit more from my side here, and these sort of quotes will come up as I'm reading. At this age, parenting becomes more about emotional validation than guiding moral behavior. She needs to know that you understand the complex and sometimes painful emotional landscape she is traveling through, and that her feelings are normal and not weird. So just listening to her problems with earnestness and empathy is the validation she needs now. As she tells you the story of her day, and she's telling you not because you need to know, but because she needs to tell you, you should listen and comment with gentle endorsements that recognize the tricky emotional journey her day has been. Emotional validation can come through comments like, "That sounds really tough for you," or "That must have made you feel, well, I don't know, how did it make you feel? And yes, I can see how that made you feel those things, me too." Make her feel that she has your full attention at that moment, that her troubles are worthy of respect and acknowledgement. And during the listening process, it can be really hard to resist the idea of giving advice. You need to tread carefully. One good rule of thumb might be always to offer advice rather than just give it. You might find yourself therefore saying, "I've heard everything you've said, and it sounds like things are going really tough for you right now. There are things I could say that might help. Would you like me to share my thoughts?" And don't be offended if she says no. Giving her the chance to consider whether she wants your advice or not will make her feel grown up and more in control of her problems. She may be curious to know what you're going to say, but she may also feel that you're interrupting and she's got more to say. She may also worry that your advice, when it comes, will demonstrate that you haven't grasped her point, especially if one of the things you're going to say is one of the 25 statements that I just read out, and that you therefore don't really understand her and what she's going through. So again, remember to focus on the emotional subtext and not on the story itself. A better way for a parent to offer specific guidance can also be to wrap it in a question. Get her to reflect. So you might say, I'm sure you've already thought about this problem from Sophie's perspective. Did that help you understand what went wrong and what next to do? And here you're inviting her to share more about the problem as opposed to giving advice, but also being respectful and patronizing. And if she hasn't thought about it from Sophie's point of view, this will prompt her to do so. Sometimes times get really, really hard and you are desperate to build her up a bit more and to make her more assertive. And here's some prompt questions that might lead into that kind of discussion. So if a new pupil joined the school and they turned into your best friend, what would they be like? Describe them to me. That, I think, can open up a really interesting discussion about her expectations of what a really good friend is and what it would be. Do you think next time there are ways in which you could handle yourself more assertively? Let's go back over. What could you have said? If the most assertive person you know was in that situation, what would they have done? And then my daughter gave me this one. She said, you know me very well as your parent. What would you think I would have done in that situation? And then, crucially, at the end of this process, when she has nothing more to say, you should find a pleasant distraction. Talk about something that makes her feel good, recall a happy memory, or talk about something she's good at. Look forward to an upcoming sport fixture or concert or trip. Maybe sit on the sofa and watch a favorite movie together. Give her the chance to move on and to heal. After a few hours or the next day, she may want to talk again, this time perhaps with a different perspective, and she may seek your advice this time, and you can rehearse strategies with her. This time, you can engage in a more dialogue and perhaps steer her more towards the best outcome, offer to talk again when the next phase is over, and help her review what happened. However, avoid chasing for the news. A daughter who's done a lot of sharing and then agreed a strategy for the next day, perhaps, has the right to move on without further feedback or mention. She will give you an update when she's ready. Putting pressure on her to disclose how the day went is not helpful. Her problems and issues belong to her and not to you. It can be very tempting to want to follow up and build on the closeness experienced the day before, to hear more about the other girls and whether or not the agreed strategy was successful. But the day that's just passed is unknowable for you. And many things will have happened that might have totally eclipsed the events of the previous day. The desire to repeat and extend the sharing of the evening before needs to come from her and not from you. So a simple and normal inquiry of how was your day is the best way to normalize things again, but at the same time leaving the door open for further conversation. So I'm at the end. Here we go. Summary. Most important thing is that every girl needs a friend, and pass your thinking through that. Don't assume that just because she's upset somebody did something wrong. Doesn't always mean the same thing. Girls don't share with you because they don't want to get told off. They also don't share with you because it's too hard or trivial to explain, and that's why they dramatize to some extent. Listen, listen, listen some more, help her to talk, and then when it's all over, distract. Ask permission before giving advice and invite her to reflect if you possibly can, rather than just lecturing. She's telling you not because you need to know, but because she needs to tell you. Right, gosh. As you can imagine, there is a book. Unfortunately, it's not published yet. And I'm sure that GDST staff will tell you when it's out. I'm hoping it'll be out sort of May, June, July, something like that. But it's this and a whole bunch more about when girls fall out. That's what it's called. And you can hopefully go and read Queen Bees and Wannabes and also have a look at my website, which is girlsonboard.co.uk. Thank you for your attention this afternoon.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for your talk. That was absolutely fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it. And I certainly think we'll all agree here that getting those relationships right for these young women is so important. And when you get those relationships right, that's when they can really flourish. And I loved your whole idea about enabling us to empower the young women we work with and live with on a day-to-day basis to kind of, as you say, negotiate their own relationships. I think, you know, GDST is all about empowering young women, and I think that really chimes really, really well with our work. So we've got a lot of questions. So I hope you're ready for this.
I am.
A range of questions and lots of positive feedback coming through as well through the Q&A. So this is the first one. It's quite a difficult one, I think, but I think it's really interesting. You talked about, obviously, parents getting involved with other parents, and that tricky situation. I think we as head teachers know how tricky that can be, and that's the sort of connected to our first question, which is, what if a parent clique causes a clique in girls in school? Any advice around that? Any ideas around that one?
I'm not sure I've got advice. I've seen it happen, absolutely. And I think the real problem with parents talking to each other is particularly if the parents fall out over what's happened, the parents, you know, being grown-ups, tend to kind of, you know, I really don't like what she said to me, what he said to me on the phone, and you start to kind of lock down on like, well, I just don't want to have it, that's a really nasty memory. And you then say to your daughter, I don't want you to be friends with Sophie. And the girls are going, what's going on? You know, and I've literally last year, a couple of years ago it was actually, had two girls who were friends in secret. So I suppose all I can say about that is that you just need to reflect that idea back to those parents. Do you realize how hard you're making it for the girls? And I'm sure everybody online tonight understands that thing that girls can fall out and then be best friends the next day. I mean, oh my goodness. And I'm sure you as head teacher have spent time trying to unravel and having meetings with parents and with girls and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly they're friends again. You think, what was all that about? We spent 3 days trying to unpick this, because you were never going to talk to each other again, and now you're best friends again. Absolutely. Well, they have that right, don't they?
So would you kind of, if there is a group of parents who is a friendship clique outside school, would you advise them to encourage their daughters to be friends in school, or how would you manage to kind of sort that one out for them? Would you?
It's a very tricky one. I just think that, as I say, you just need to reflect back on parents that the relationships that they have with each other need to be at that level, at adult with adult level. And what the girls do is up to them. Absolutely.
So another one a little bit linked to this idea of cliques again. So one of our parents asks in response to your talk, what if their daughter moves away from an activity, say for example sport, because they're finding that activity is tainted by cliques within that activity, or perhaps by unpleasant behavior. As a parent, how might you kind of advise your daughter around that? Because obviously you want them to do the sport, but they're finding it very difficult to engage with that activity because of this unpleasant behavior that's going on.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to sort of fly the flag of Girls on Board and GDS. Many of the GDST schools are doing it, because I think in a Girls on Board school, actually those girls who are being a bit kind of exclusive around that just wouldn't be allowed to be. And they, well, you know, it's not enforced by rules, but what Girls on Board does is to get all the girls to reflect on each other and their empathetic idea of what it must now be like to be that girl. And it doesn't take even the slightest hint really from a PE teacher to kind of go, you know, are we including people? And they go, oh gosh, sorry, yes, we are. You know, because Girls on Board brings that empathy out. And it sort of also makes it into a bit more of an explicit rule. You not only can you not actively exclude somebody, but you have to include them. Otherwise, we're going to have another Girls on Board session and just make that point again, you know? So Girls on Board almost acts as a kind of a disincentive, you know, like, come on, are you getting on? Because if you're not, we're going to go through the principles again. And they go, yeah, no, we've got it. And it just, Girls on Board is never going to stop girls falling out, obviously, because that's just human nature, but it keeps a cap on it. It stops it turning into bullying. It stops it turning into precisely that kind of situation where, as a girl and as her parent, you're going, this really isn't working. It's actually affecting my daughter's life because she doesn't want to play netball anymore because all the other girls are in the clique and she's not there.
So I would think that would be a good time for that parent to get in touch with that teacher, perhaps that PE teacher, and just have a quiet word and say, listen, this is what's happening. My daughter doesn't want to come to netball anymore because this behavior is upsetting her. Is there something you could do creatively to manage this? Do you think that would be a good piece of advice for a parent?
No, I don't. I'm sorry, because I think the problem with the teacher going into that group of girls who are being a bit cliquey and saying, what are we doing about Sophie because you're leaving her out? They're going to go, but we're not leaving her out. And we're fine. I mean, what are you talking about? You give me an example, they will say, of where we've actually left her out. And we'll say that we didn't. We always talk to her. We always smile at her. But we all know that they're being disingenuous about that. You know, so what we've got to do is we've got to empower them and give them ownership over this problem. You've got the problem, not me. You've got the problem where she is complaining about your behavior. You need to solve it. Does that make sense? Yeah,
no, that's good advice. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because as a parent, you want your daughter to take part in that activity, and that's your prime thing.
Giving a bit more of a long-term answer, but it's to do with this empathy being part of the school and the way it works.
Absolutely. Okay, so some really positive feedback. Somebody here saying that your talk is brilliant. So thumbs up. Well done, Andrew. Hurrah. Have you got any strategies? Again, a question from the parent. Any strategies for how to sort of neutralize queen bee behavior?
Queen bee behavior is really tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that it starts with as many people around the queen bee realizing that that's what she's doing. That's why I think that just using that language, just like, this is queen bee behavior, isn't it? It is, come on, you know? And then, so when she comes to one of you or me, like, oh, okay. It's very flattering that you want to be my friend and you're going to shower me with my love and attention, but I'm just going to kind of be cool around it. And you're getting the support from the other girls. You're not being mean to her. You're not going to be horrible about this, but you're going to make sure you remain connected to your other friends. That will gradually put pressure on the queen bee to drop this kind of all-powerful stance that she takes, because she will meet some resistance, some gentle, loving resistance. So she'll realize that actually she can be friends with people without behaving in this particularly traumatic way.
I think it's really reassuring that, like when you talked about all these different types of girls, for parents, I think it's so reassuring because it reminds us all that it's quite normal for this, as you call it, turbulence to occur within girls' relationships. Do you think this is something that happens within boys as well?
Okay, so boys' friendships can be turbulent. Obviously, they can. They're not allowed to hit each other, so you know it's not true to say that they hit each other. But they tend to flare up and get very cross, and perhaps sort of abuse each other's mothers, things like that, and then sulk quite a lot, and then just sort of mope around, and then just they do. I mean, I don't sound stereotypical. They do just seem to move on and forget it, and it just. And occasionally as a head teacher, I've had to get two boys together, but probably not more than 3 or 4 times in my whole career have I had to get boys in the room and say, now look, we need to go back in time. Where did this beef between you actually start? And eventually kind of resolve it in some way or another. So no, I mean, I think that for me, the problem with boys is very different. It's not about friendship, it's about motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also totally normal for young women to say, well, 3 years ago, this happened, and those memories are, and that impact of that behavior is still very strong for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally normal that happens to young women, isn't it?
Just say something about that. In Girls on Board, we give it a name. We call it back pocketing.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that.
And there's a statute of limitations, 2 weeks. Okay. Okay, and that's it. If it's more than 2 weeks old, I'm sorry, you've timed out.
Excellent.
You can't put it in your back pocket and keep it. It's gone.
I'm going to use that tomorrow, Andrew. That's really helpful. I love that idea.
You lose it. It's gone.
Yeah. Okay, slightly different question now. How would you encourage a girl, and this again is coming from a parent, so a girl who doesn't like to share her worries and concerns, should parents actively probe their daughters if they're not naturally forthcoming? How do you feel about that? Again, it's a parent asking. So
no, absolutely, and that in a way is kind of what the whole talk is about, isn't it? It's how can you fulfill that incredibly urgent need as a parent, that you're desperate to talk to her and find out what she's feeling and how it's going for her. As much as anything else, from a safety point of view, you want to feel that if she reaches a crisis and she's being badly influenced by a boy or something like that, that she will come to you in order to reach a point of support and help. I think for me, it's just constantly trying to get across that you're not judging her. You know, you can say anything. It's like, whatever the most dramatic thing is, it's fine. We're just going to deal with it. And oh, that happened. Right. Okay. How do you feel about how does that work for you? So I guess you have to slightly ask yourself, why is she so reluctant to share? And it can have been just the tiniest moment when she was only 9 or 10 years old, when she told you something and there was a look in your eye that was a little bit judgmental, and she just, oh, I don't want that. I don't want to share. So it's just about finding those moments, and again, perhaps not looking her in the eye, having some fun, going for a walk, talking about the dog, and just prompting her. And then you should just, she may well just start to, and you just encourage that by remaining mostly quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about those conversations without eye contact, and certainly as a parent, my best conversations with my children, who are now older than teenage, were in the car. In fact, it's the only time I got much out of my son, to be perfectly honest, but it's a really good technique.
It is.
Because it also makes it easier from a parent's point of view, I think, because a lot of these things are difficult for us to talk about, aren't they, as well? Because, we're just parents, we're not experts. Okay, so the next one then is again from one of our parents, and this is it. So my daughter acts like a lonely girl when she goes to one of her regular activities each week. She's upset that she doesn't have friends there and that other girls are friends, but the parent is saying that she doesn't really put much effort into making friends. And she says she's too shy. So is there any advice for, say, a lonely girl to be a little bit more confident, when she's kind of making excuses for not making friends, but obviously wants to make them? How do you manage that, do you think?
Yeah, tricky, and it can take time. I think that's very important, but I think it's putting across to the girl that friendship is based on things you have in common, and therefore she needs to explore those things. So if the other girls are reaching out to her, whatever they're reaching out over, to some extent, she's got to try to accept it. And that can be very difficult, because if the other girls are all kind of into painting their faces with makeup and she just, that doesn't appeal to her at all, that can be very difficult. But just finding some way of saying, yes, I'll watch that movie too. I will listen to that music. I will have a look at that blog or whatever, and make remarks and join in with that energy. That's where friendship is going to come from. So I would encourage her, yes, to find things that she's got in common with those girls. Now, we talked about having sleepovers, which is great, but the classic mistake of having a party of any sort is to restrict the numbers lower than the number within the friendship group. Because I've actually had a girl who everyone just rejected, and when we finally got to the bottom of why they've been rejected, it's because, well, you had a party and only asked 4 people, and that we're a group of 6, and they fell out with her, and it was kind of the parents' fault. So, but I think that is a way forward. But arming her with things to say and sort of ways to connect can definitely be a way forward. It's about music, it's about culture, about movies, about movie stars, about pop stars, about clothes. All of these things are things that young people share, and she needs to find ways to share those too.
So actually giving a sort of questions to ask before she goes along, so that it's not a case of being shy, because you've got a bit of a script.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think this is about time for our last question. And it's a goodie because it's slightly different to the ones we've been looking at so far. What if your daughter has actually admitted to being mean? Is it not okay to point it out? Or is it something that you should point out, and how would you respond to that, Andrew? If your daughter's actually come out with being the mean person?
If my daughter said that to me, I would say, wow, that's an incredibly honest and amazing thing to say. Tell me a little bit more. You know, who have you been mean to? Why? Tell me what happened, and why did you react in that particular way? Did it make you feel better? You know, just digging around in the feelings that led to it. And you've told me, which is fantastic. I'm so pleased you told me. So why did you tell me? You know, what kind of support do you want from me at this point? You know, I'm not judging you. I don't need to judge you because you've sort of judged yourself, haven't you? And it's clear that you would having told me you would like to change. So is there something you want from me as your parent that can support you in changing? Is there something that we need to do together or talk through? Would you like more time in the evening to unload? Because that's possibly where this is coming from, that sense of like just a massive frustration. So, you know, meanness often is, again, it's still about the imperative, isn't it? It's still about trying to find trusting and reliable friendships. And you're mean because you're pushing somebody else away so that you can then be with this girl. So again, that's where it's coming from. So let's talk about that. How do you learn to make trusting and reliable friendships, but also how do you overcome your anxiety that just because that girl went and looked away, you know, that doesn't mean she's not your friend anymore. You know, it's okay. We need to just ride through that moment and into that time, which is really hard at times.
So difficult not to be judgmental as a parent, isn't it? Because we all, when we have children, desperately want them to be perfect and happy, etc., and it's not going to be like that.
And I think just say something about that judgmental thing, that, you know, you still have to be the moral arbiter of that, okay? But I think what you can do is you can say, so are you happy with that? So I hear you, you know, you went to school, got told off with putting your eyebrows up. So how do you feel about that now? I hear you, you know, you stayed out, you have stayed out after the curfew and you're coming back now, it's now 10 o'clock, you were meant to be back at 9:30. So if you just come and talk to me, so how do you feel about that? Because, you know, obviously, you know, what's going on? How's it going for you? So that she then has to reflect. And I gave some advice to some parents the other day about their son, actually, who got himself into some trouble. You know, he stole some stuff, you know. And so they're going, well, we still got to let him out. You know, we can't just put him inside a prison all day long. But we want to check where he's going and what he's doing. So I said the question to ask him, and I think this is a good one really, is as he's going out, you say, Alex, are you happy with the plans that you've made for this evening? And he's going, oh, I wish you hadn't said that, you know, because I am actually going to the underpass to buy some more vaping gear. And now you've asked me that, and no, I'm not happy with this plan because I know I'm not doing the right thing. And you haven't judged him. You haven't given him the excuse to be rebellious.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think so many schools as well, we certainly are exploring sort of more restorative approaches to behaviour management, and the idea of talking about choices and the impact of children's choices with them, I found as a head teacher really, really beneficial. And actually the young people, they all want to have those conversations. And as you say, have the opportunity to be listened to, and talk through the conversations. I think that's all we've got time for. We've got loads of questions, Andrew. It's been absolutely fascinating talk. I think being a parent is, as I just said, so incredibly difficult. No one's given us a script when we have these children. But actually what you've done this evening is you have given us a bit of a script. And I think it's really, really helpful to all of us as parents and myself as a head teacher to just hear what you've got to say, and remember some of these script style ideas that you've given us to work with. So thank you so much. Obviously, the book's coming out soon, and I'm sure GDST will send the link to our parents. But on behalf of GDST Talks, can I just thank you for your commitment this evening, and also for answering all those really difficult questions on an amazingly difficult topic. But there's been some absolutely brilliant feedback in the chat as well. So a big thank you from us.
Thank you very much. It's been my huge privilege and pleasure to talk to all of you tonight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Can I just then plug our next events in the series? So Thursday, the 6th of May at 6 p.m, we've got Managing the Transition from Primary to Secondary with Grace Barrett from the award-winning self-esteem team. So obviously we're in the summer term now, we're already thinking about next September, can we believe it? But that transition from primary to secondary, if you're interested in that, that's May the 6th at 6 p.m. And on May the 13th at 6 p.m, we've got Healthy Eating for Positive Mood and Positive Study. So that talk is part of our Healthy Approaches to Eating series, and that's with our nutritional therapist, Marisa Karani. So I think both of those will be absolutely excellent. As I think we've put in the chat during this evening, the recording of the session will be made available as soon as possible. So we'll share it through the links that we've used this evening. And obviously feel free to share that with family and friends and colleagues as well. Thank you so much for your feedback this evening. Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments here or also on the feedback questionnaire that we'll send you out with the recording. So I think someone's just asked about those two talks. The first is Thursday, the 6th of May at 6 o'clock, and the second is Thursday, the 13th of May. So just falls to me to thank Andrew once again, and thank you all for your attendance at this talk this evening, and wish you a very good evening. Thanks very much.